Well, for a more in-depth analysis into Kenyan politics after the verdict, I'm now joined via Zoom by Patrick Gathara, a political analyst here in Nairobi. Patrick, first off, what's your assessment of the outcome of Kenya's presidential election dispute as rendered by the Supreme Court?
Thanks for having me. I think actually this is actually a win for Kenya, not necessarily because of the fact that Ruto is going to be president, but more because the process itself was finally for the first time in a very long time upheld and shown to actually have worked. So all the stuff that we've been trying to do since 2013, the technology that we had tried to put in place, both to identify voters, to transmit results, to make the election more credible, seems to have worked this time. And the court actually, that's what they said. So I think it is a real huge step for us. I mean, coming from 2017 when we had the annulled election, that did set a bar for the sort of process we should have. And I think now with what we saw in this election, with a public portal where anybody could tally up results, it establishes another new bar for Kenyan elections going forward. So I think it's actually a win for the country going forward.
Well, it was a rather close contest. So what should the president-elect William Ruto do to reunite the country, given the political polarization brought by the recent general election?
Well, I think he's taken a few first commendable steps by reaching out to the people he was competing with, specifically to Raila Odinga, who was his closest competitor. I think it's really important that the political class now comes together and essentially shows the country that we've gone through this process. We now have a decision that we've got to live with for the next 5 years. So while I do expect that the losing coalition, Azimio and Raila Odinga, will continue to keep the Ruto administration, as it will be, to hold them to account or to hold their feet to the fire. I also think that it's time basically that people see that having a dispute over political choices is not enmity. We can come together then and move forward from this, and try and rebuild and build up our institutions.
So, he has already reached out to his opponents, but what role should the losing side of Raila Odinga now play to enhance accountability of the incoming administration?
Well, I mean, they've got a sizable representation in Parliament. Still, we're waiting to see how chips fall, who will have a majority there. And I think it's really going to be important for them to be able to utilize that muscle to hold the administration to account. The last thing we should want as Kenyans as Kenyans is basically a government that is not answerable. Pretty much anyone is answerable to itself. For the last 4 years, that's pretty much what we've had in Parliament. So following the handshake between Raila Odinga and President Uhuru Kenyatta. So it's actually quite important that they establish themselves, I think, as a potent, effective opposition, are willing to actually push for accountability within government, and I would hope they don't do it sort of as quote unquote Ruto's friends. I'm quite suspicious of his talk of saying that he wants to be held to account. Our history and even his own history in power doesn't hold that up. So my hope is that they will set out their own agenda and try and push it through Parliament. The presidency is not everything that matters. There are other levels of power that they can utilize.
So this is the third time that opposition leader Raila Odinga has gone to court over the election. So how is the verdict of the Supreme Court likely to impact the electoral process in Kenya going forward?
Well, we'll wait and see what the full verdict is. That will come in about 3 weeks' time. But I think the important thing is when it clarifies what our laws and what our constitution requires of us and of the bodies that are running our elections. And I think that it's really important that the judges lay out, when they're laying out their rationale, really be clear. What are these things that our institutions are meant to do? For example, what is things like verification? What does that actually mean? What is the role and status of a form that's been scanned and is put on the public portal? Is that the equivalent of a physical form, that's signed at the polling station? So I think there are many things that they need to clarify. And they've said themselves in today's judgment that there will be recommendations that they will make about how we can improve our electoral system. And I think those can be the basis now of a proper public discussion and debate over the state of our electoral system. What are the gaps that have been identified? What can we fix going forward so that to ensure that we have an even better election in 2027?
All right, Patrick Gathara joining us there from Nairobi. Thank you.